Also, they shut down any debate, any amendment, any filibusters. They shut down any means that would block these trade agreements from coming to the floor. They have to come to the floor in a short period of time once they are sent over by the president to be signed. They have destroyed and thumbed their noses at the Constitution, and the only senator who stood up and said anything about that was Senator Sessions. And he took the time to put together a presentation with a big whiteboard behind him. Actually, it wasn't a whiteboard. It was a series of papers that he had printed up to try to educate the congressmen. And it isn't the problem that they're ignorant. They just don't care. They're bought off by these large financial interests, as Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton are. And you can see that today. When Bernie Sanders supports Hillary Clinton, he didn't get anything on the opposition to these sovereignty-destroying, jobs-destroying trade deals. Now, thinking liberals are going to understand that. They need to understand what is at issue here. And that is a very important thing. Now, as we look forward to the convention, as I mentioned in the last segment, one of these legal challenges to the primaries, we actually have these arrogant Republican delegates who say your votes don't matter. This is a guy, basically, we could call it the superdelegate lawsuit. This is Beau Carrell. And, you know, I put out, I contacted all three of these people, the guy, Hoagland, as well as Unruh, and this Beau Carrell guy. I said, come on, let's talk about this. Let's talk about how your rights trump those of the voters. Okay, they say, oh, it's a private club. This is our own organization, and it is not a public thing. We should not be subject to any laws, except that they use their monopoly, or we should say their duopoly status, these two major parties, to thoroughly control the election process. And they also use taxpayer money to run these elections. And they tell everybody that it's an election. But then when the election is held, they go back behind closed doors, and Cruz starts selecting his delegates. This guy, by the way, was a Cruz person doing these dirty tricks, as is Unruh. And I don't know about Hoagland, who he was supporting. But that's the kind of corruption we're seeing. And we see that kind of corruption within the Democrat Party. Understand, the Democrat Party did their bias, they did their private dance up front, if you will, okay? Hillary started out with 15% of the delegates that she needed. In every one of these states, 10 to 15% of the delegates were set up as super delegates. And then all of the Democrat states were done proportionally. That meant that a challenger had to beat her by 10 to 15% in the popular vote to even break even on the delegates. That's how they rigged their position, okay? The Republicans, on the other hand, they did most of theirs after the fact. So you would have an election, and then after the fact, they would come in with Ted Cruz and quietly try to appoint their people instead of people who supported the person that everybody voted for. So if you voted for Trump, wouldn't you think that Trump would get people who are loyal to him? So if they have a brokered convention, they would fight it that way. So now it looks as if that is going to be shut down. That was one of the last efforts they had to shut that down. So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops. This convention coverage, both of these conventions are going to be very interesting. There is going to be a lot of protests, possibly violent. I don't know. I don't think we're going to, I don't think we've seen anything like these conventions since the 1968 Democrat conventions in Chicago, those riots that were there. I think we're going to see a lot of that happening. Now, coming up in the program, we're going to talk about police reform. We're going to talk about the killer robots. We're also going to talk about the killer self-crashing cars. We've had a third crash from Tesla, and the SEC is also taking a look at Tesla and the fact that they made a lot of money in the stock market in the nearly 2 months that they waited before making public the issues that they had with autopilot. Remember, autopilot is a key selling feature of their cars. And if you don't tell people that you're having problems with this, if you cover that up and you make major trade deals on the stock market, the SEC is starting to get interested in that. Okay, they've had the Department of Transportation in Washington running interference for these Silicon Valley car manufacturers like Google and Tesla, saying we're not going to allow states and local communities to establish safety laws. We're going to shut those down, just as they do for GMO regulation, right? We want to know what's in our food. So a lot of states and communities have started putting in GMO labeling laws. They said, no, we're tired of trying to fight these things one by one. We've lost a couple of these. So let's just shut this down at the federal level. So they got together with Big Agra, and they're going to put pressure on the government. We've had the DARK Act come up to shut down the truth about what is in your food. And in the same way, they don't like the fact that people in California are starting to look at all the accidents around these cars that we're told are going to put an end to all deaths on the highway. You've heard that, right? You've heard that many times. 30,000 plus people killed every year on the highways. Well, we're just going to stop all of that completely. These cars will not make mistakes. And we've been pointing out how much of a lie that is from the very beginning. You don't think your computer crashes. You don't think your iPhone crashes. You don't think you have problems when they update the software on your iPhone, and now the old model no longer works. They're taking that same attitude, and they're going to put it on the road driving your car. So we're going to take a look at that, as well as some of the ethical issues that were exposed with the killer robots in Dallas. Also, the Pokemon Go augmented reality. What is that about? What are the issues behind that? We had an article yesterday from Kit Daniels talking about how In-Q-Tel, the venture capital firm of the CIA, had some connections with the company that was behind this new piece of software. It has truly gone viral. We've never seen anything like this. It's added about $8 billion worth of market cap value to Nintendo. It's incredibly huge. Okay, in half a day, it became the #1 selling app on Apple. And understand, it's very different from virtual reality. It doesn't create an entire reality system that you put on blinders and move around in a room. Instead, you go out and you walk around, and it shows on your phone where you really are, but then it augments that and puts little Pokemon characters that you can collect and then take to other places and have battles with them. That's the idea behind augmented reality. At first glance, you look at it and you say, well, great, it gets the kids off of the couch and it gets them out and around, but then there's other issues of privacy. And so we're going to take a look at several different technological issues that are presenting themselves to society at this moment. But before we do, we've had Bernie Sanders endorsing Hillary Clinton. We've got Loretta Lynch at this moment talking to Congress about her tarmac tete-a-tete with Bill and why Hillary is not being indicted. And I think maybe what we should have is a T-shirt that instead of Hillary for prison, maybe Hillary for privilege. When you look at Bill Ayers, the guy who popularized this whole idea with the Weather Underground and the Students for Democratic Society back in the 1960s, this whole idea of white privilege, who weaponized that idea. This is one of the most privileged white people you have ever seen, okay? This is a guy whose dad was incredibly wealthy, who was able to go on a terrorist spree and then escape all prosecution. That's white privilege, okay? That's real privilege. And Hillary is the same kind of person. Look at this story from the New American. Hillary Clinton contends systemic bias in the U.S. criminal justice system targets blacks. And it's like, well, I guess Exhibit A would be Hillary Clinton, because as she's pontificating about how blacks are unfairly targeted, we also see that a black congresswoman, Corrine Brown, has been indicted for, guess what? Using a phony charity. You mean like the Clinton Foundation? To skim money from people, and she is not going to get off. She's facing 357 years in prison. How's that for disparity between the white privileged Grand Mal, Hillary Clinton, and a black congressman? Congresswoman, stay with us. We'll be right back. We'll talk about Hillary Clinton's privilege here in just a moment. But before I do, I just want to remind you that we have extended the sale on, this is from our July 4th mega sale. We had several items that are on tremendous discount. We've continued 2 of those as a thank you to those of you who support our operation. We've had a lot of demand for Survival Shield X2 and the storable food deals. We've extended this now until tonight. This is 20% off Survival Shield X2, which is rapidly selling out, and 20 to 40% off InfoWars Select storable food. We've now extended that to tonight. You can find that at InfoWarsStore.com. Now is the time to prepare for unrest. As we look at the summer of chaos coming up, as we look at the push by our government to try to not only federalize the police, but try to push for martial law and to divide us into a race war. We don't know really what's going to happen in the future. It's time now to be prepared for yourself, for your family. Stock up while the discount is 20 to 40% off InfoWars Select Storable Food. That ends tonight. We've extended it as long as we can. Also, Survival Shield X2, which is also still 20% off. That ends tonight as well. Okay, let's talk about Hillary, the woman who says that there is so much bias against black people, and yet here we see a black congresswoman, Corrine Brown, who's been indicted, who's looking at 357 years in prison for doing what? She took $800,000 in donations to a supposed charitable organization. One Door for Education was the name of it. But she was accused of using that as a personal slush fund. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like the Clintons? And yet, what does Hillary get? Nothing. Well, you want to talk about white privilege? That's Hillary Clinton. Now we've got as another example of how she is setting all new precedents. How, as I've said in the past, they've taken this religion of national security. They've used it to destroy our due process. They've used it to destroy our legal system, our privacy, our Bill of Rights. And yet here we have Hillary Clinton thumbing her nose at that state religion. But we have some here at U.S. News Report, they say attorneys for people who have allegedly mishandled classified information are saying they want the same deal that Hillary Clinton got. And this is a defense attorney who works for national security whistleblowers, and he points out that he thinks that he can get a Clinton deal for his clients in the future. He said in 2015, shortly after CIA Director David Petraeus got a plea bargain, which was just a slap on the wrist, probation and a small fine because he shared highly classified information with his mistress. He said, we absolutely got on the phone to the prosecutor and said, hey, we want the Petraeus sentence. We want the commensurate parallel sentence. And he said, we got it. So they just got a small thing. So he says, I fully expect that we're not going to see jail time for any of my clients who violate national security. Now, understand, some of these people should not be going to jail. We've talked about Thomas Drake. We've talked about how they manufactured charges against him. Hillary Clinton's correspondence that she was using to cover up her secret deals, that was born classified. When she's talking to a head of state and the private conversations that they have that are recorded there, that's born classified. We also saw her instructing employees to remove the classified heading so it could be transmitted. That was in the emails as well. And yet, in the case of Thomas Drake, who was a bona fide whistleblower, who was talking about how the NSA was violating the Constitution, violating even the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, they went to his house and they found a couple of documents. As we've mentioned this before, they said, hey, this isn't classified, but you should have known that it should have been classified. It should have been classified, you should have known it. Another one, they said, well, it's not classified. They classified it the same day, then unclassified it 3 months later. That's the double standard. And it isn't just a racial one. It's one standard for the people at the top, the corrupt criminals. A government rots from the head down, and that's what we're seeing with the Clintons. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I want to play a short clip of Bernie Sanders talking about the Democrat platform. But before we do, I want to continue with what I was talking about with Hillary Clinton. Of course, Alex Jones is going to be joining us in the next segment, and he's going to be talking about the Pokemon Go phenomenon. What's behind that? We're both going to be talking about that in the next segment. But again, talking about Hillary and talking about her special privilege, the corruption that she embodies, we now have an interesting thing that is developing. We have the Judicial Watch, people who have been following very closely and have really exposed a lot of stuff with their Freedom of Information requests. They've done a great job of investigating, of uncovering the corruption of the Clintons. Now, a judge has given Hillary Clinton until today, so we'll see what's going to happen with this. This is a story from WorldNet Daily, to reveal why she should not be forced to testify in a federal case about her aide, and we put that term in quotes, Huma Abedin, double-dipping employment at the State Department, okay? So again, we've got a black congresswoman who is facing 357 years in prison because she had a bogus charitable foundation, kind of like the Clinton Foundation, except she got $800,000 instead of tens of millions of dollars, or maybe hundreds of millions of dollars, as the Clintons may have done over the years. instead of just being dismissed, she's going to be looking at 357 years.